All right, are we here? Can you hear me? So those of you who are there, if you can see the comments box, or grab the link to go to the comments box and let me know you're here. And we'll just, we'll wait for a few more heads to come on. My clock at the moment says 19:28, so maybe we've got a couple of minutes until the official start. We'll give people a few moments. If you are here and you're one of the early birds, welcome, welcome, welcome. It's such a pleasure, such an honor for you guys to be here. So yeah, let's see who's coming through. And if you are here, stick some words in the comment box, and I'm going to find out. I've got two computers tonight, a lot of high technology, so that I can see the comments, so I can interact, and so I can actually make sure that we can get the most out of this. I'm so excited you're here. So yeah, we'll give it a few minutes, let some stragglers arrive, and of course, share people, share. If there are people out there who you think would love this, just send them a quick message now. Go for it. We've got a few moments until we officially kick off. So welcome, and I'm going to drink some water and just kind of be for a moment. We're going to see that's going to be an important part of this session we're going to share. So cool. Who is here already? Let's have a look. Okay, so I think it's officially 19:30. We'll see who else is on. Who's gonna show up? Just switching between the two computers. If you're just joining us, don't worry. We're just taking a few moments to let a few other people come on board. Welcome, and if you can get access to the comments on the Google Plus Hangout page, then do pop a comment in and let us know you're here. I know that some people still can't work this out. This technology is amazing, but still can't work out. Some people can leave comments, some people can't. So if you can't, don't worry. Just enjoy. It's going to be an ace session, so we're gonna have a fantastic time. Okay, cool. We've got a few here. Nice. Matt's here. Cool. Chenzo's here. Good. We're all good. Bevel's here. Good. Nice, 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 nice. All right. So they're starting to pile on now. Everyone's just kind of lining up, getting the streaming sorted. Good, 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 good. All right, what are we saying? I reckon 1.5 more minutes, and then let's get cracking. Let's go, because you can probably see I'm a little bit excited, a little bit. I get so excited. As a kid, I had full-on ADHD, like massively. So it tends to kind of come out every now and then. You may have seen me being quite bouncy. If I was a story character, I'm almost certain I'd be Tigger, because I used to bounce as a kid a lot. And whenever I'm doing something that I love doing, before it, I'm like almost like Frock Groves. Hey, whew, that was a fight last night, I tell you. Wow. So let's see what we got. Okay, cool. All right, good. So fantastic. Brilliant, you guys are here. I think we're going to get started in just a moment. And it's great that some of you are able to comment. So if you can, keep interacting. And I know that some of you will be watching on different screens, so cool. No worries if you can't. It's all good. It's all good. All right, let us do this. Welcome. My name is George Hardwick, for those of you who don't know. I'm the author of Creative Uprising, which is a book about how to make a living and make a difference doing what you love. I'm also a speaker, a poet, mentor, and in other lives as well. In my hometown, I'm a youth worker. And tonight, I'm really grateful you're here because I'm going to be sharing a talk I call New Story, New You. And in the last few months, I've been doing a lot of research. I'm a passionate learner. Been doing a lot of research about stories because when I was trying to think of how to make the biggest impact in the world, how can each of us, really be part of creating something special in this world, the thing that kept coming up was stories. And so tonight, I want to share with you some stories and some, I guess, distinctions about why stories are so powerful. For those of you who couldn't get involved with the comments, please, I'm going to be asking some questions, so fire back some comments at me, and we'll just build from there. It's going to be amazing. So, first up, I always like to start with a question. So please feel free to pop your question in the box there, the answer rather. The question is this. Right now, how content with you, how content with your life and with the world are you? How content are you with your life and with the world? And just take a moment to actually really think about that. To, see what your head's saying. See what your heart's saying as well. What's your gut saying as well? How content are you with your life? And how content are you with the world? And just take a moment and, maybe make a few notes, because I really want to make sure you guys get something out of this. So let's go into this. How content are you? I'm going to check out the comments. Cool. Okay, so a few people are still arriving. Good. So the question for those who are still arriving is, right now, how content are you with your life and with the world? And I just want to throw that out there as a starting point, because every story has a little kind of, it has a spark that drives it forward. And very often a question can be that spark. It's a journey of discovery and the story plays out. So I want to begin tonight with that question. How content are you with your life and with the world? So if you can see the comments box, go ahead and pop some comments in. Otherwise, just have a think for yourself. What does that mean to you? Cool. So thank you for answering, because sometimes we give the superficial answer where we have to smile and everything's fine and dandy. And then if we're actually honest with ourselves, the truth sometimes is the fine and dandy. Everything's great, everything's amazing. But also there's very often some stuff that we'd rather not engage with, that we'd rather just, we kind of know it's there, but right now we don't want to go there. And tonight I want to make sure we explore both of those elements. Okay, my aim for this evening's session is to do two things. Number one, I want to peel back the layers of some of the stories we assume to be true, and actually that those stories and the assumptions that go with them are some of the biggest things that are holding us back as individuals and as a species in terms of our potential. See, I believe that we human beings, we are just incredible, and yet we are incredibly limiting ourselves. You know, we are operating at maybe like 7% of our true potential. And one of the fantastic and most powerful ways we can liberate that true potential is through believing in and telling to each other and living better stories. So number one tonight, I want to make sure we kind of peel back the layers of the stories that are limiting us. And I want to also make sure that I share with you some alternative stories. My aim there being to disrupt. Get disruptive, that's right. We're going to kind of get a bit, I've got no idea what that means. It's kind of my dancing and disrupting. But no, I want to make sure we disrupt some of the stories, some of those limiting stories, by giving you alternatives and examples so that you can believe in better. And as I'm sure you know, many of you know, when we believe in better, better starts to happen, right? So I want to make sure I take you through the promises I outlined in some of the emails, for those of you who kind of signed up, and some of the blogs you may have seen. We're going to be doing all that, and we're going to really make sure that tonight you leave certain. Certain that you are not alone, that you are not crazy, and that we can genuinely build a future that is almost beyond dreaming right on this planet. And that plays out both as individuals and in the wider world. So I want to make sure that you leave certain that that possibility is not a possibility, it's an absolute certainty, and it is going to be happening. And I want to make sure that you go away knowing that, but also knowing that there's work to be done, but that it is joyful work. So that is my real aim, to pierce this limiting story, to disrupt using powerful and inspirational examples of other stories, so that you can leave certain and knowing that a better way is possible for yourself and for us as a species. So I want to kick things off having explored that opening question and outlined what the aims of the session are. I want to introduce myself in the way that I love to do, and I hope that you'll enjoy as well. And after that, we're going to look a bit at who this session is really for, because if you're here, there's no accident. So I want to make sure that you're really going to get something out of it. So let me first just introduce myself, and the way I want to do that is with a poem that speaks to a lot of what we're going to be exploring tonight, and it's called "All in Our Hands," because it really is. It is all in our hands to make change. And this poem was inspired by my old hometown, which is a tiny little town in Warwickshire called Shipston-on-Stour. And when I was a child, it was amazing. It was full of independent shops. We'd go to like the grocers and the fishmonger. There was even like a gun shop where I used to go and get fishing tackle and things. It was amazing. And when I see it today, it's like a ghost town, literally. And I reference that in the poem, because the local trade and the vibrancy and the life and the community that went with that has been erased in favor of, I guess, holiday homes in many ways. People who have, big, bright jobs in the city, earning a lot of money, coming and kind of getting a second home in the country, and they're basically tourists, but they're, regular tourists in a town that once was vibrant. And their kind of tourism has really changed the character of the town. And so I look at that and then take it onto a global perspective. What does it mean? What are the forces? So this is called All in Our Hands. Anxious old folks and bored-looking youths. These are a few of a ghost town's truths. Quaint market towns dragged downwardly by second house hunters and SUVs. You see, Daddy, he works in the city, and the kids, well, they're at private school. And Mummy's getting serviced by the plumber's tool. They've got a nice place in the country where they can escape the rats, where they can hide away and ignore the fact that their lives are empty and their joy is flawed. Because life's real problems, they simply ignored, thinking all would be sweet if they moved to a street with neighborhood watch and Bill on the beat. They've got superior sneers and jokes about those chav scum. And they're killing the towns that once were handsome. So I say give them a mirror to look at themselves, because the worth of a human is not measured in wealth. Yet look around the world, what do we see? The poor oppressed by greed and the wealthy. And that's why the future of our planet seems to be these apocalyptic visions of hate, fear, greed, and fundamentalism. This war of man upon man where West battles East. And because it's making people money, we'll see no peace. Well, me? I was taught to grasp my dreams, stay strong and believe. And one day, I'll be proud of the things I'd achieved. So life, what happened? Who stole our hopes and our dreams, our laughter, our loving, all the things life means? Who unleashed this terror and rained the bombs from the sky? Why are we living for death instead of for life? Because we're all brothers and sisters, yet we cease to be as human kills human in pursuit of greed. Well, as the darkness engulfs, it's time for revolution. Time to live for one another. Be our own solution. So please, don't lie down and just be a statistic, because then the way of the world will just continue sadistic. That's why I come with this plea. Let us be humanity freed, because a human is not human who ignores our equality. The facts are clear. We've all the proof we need. The same colour shared by the blood we bleed. So as the fate of our planet hangs by a single thread, let's blaze a trail where the hateful won't tread, and so dread in the hearts of the greedy and cruel, as they seek control of our mind with their number one tool, which is the promotion of lies, whose goal is conflict, so they can maintain their control of a globe of conscripts. As they flip the script and let spit in their face, their attitude is racist against the human race. And there's just one way we'll reclaim our fate. Only our love and compassion disintegrate hate. That's why my final statements concern return to freedom and corporation liberation. Do we really need them? Because if we can rediscover our community's cohesion, we can unite the regions to defy those legions of corporate sharks that want to clone this land. In Tesco's, IKEA, Starbucks, and Matalan. And I have a plan, but it involves all of us here tonight. It's on us to create a future that's bright. So please, don't swoon at my parting words. They are truths undeniable, and they're the fertile soil for our future more viable. Corporations need our money. Governments need our votes. So ours is the power, and ours the hope. So that was a poem called All in Our Hands, and you may have felt like I was ranting a bit there, and I'm not going to lie, that poem is a few years old, and back then I was in a very different space to where I am now, but I wanted to share it because it really speaks to a lot of the anger that we feel sometimes. And people are like, oh, anger, you know, it's a waste of energy and all this. Absolutely, anger does terrible things to the body and terrible things to the world. But sometimes it is one of the only expressions of how someone or how a nation is feeling. Sometimes righteous anger needs to be expressed so that we can move through to fullness, to to build something new. So I wanted to share that poem just to give a sense of perhaps how you might be feeling, and certainly how a lot of other people are feeling in the world. That sense of powerlessness, seeing all this violence, and actually knowing that ultimately the power lies with us. So tonight's session, I've put it together for the kinds of people like you, I guess, who at times can feel like what they're doing in the world, whether it's their work, is meaningless. It's lacking something, and it doesn't feel fulfilling because of that. And also for people who feel like they have so much more to give, but there is this system that's kind of like suffocating us. And when we see the rise of films like V for Vendetta and things like that, it can be very, very easy to connect with that, because sometimes we just feel like, wow, that kind of thing is happening. and also that you're frustrated at the state of the world. You know things don't have to be as they are, and yet we seem to just march on into possible oblivion, let's be honest. And as a result, it can be very easy just to tune into autopilot, where you just think, I just do what I can do, and the rest I can't. We become numb almost, and therefore we lose that spark. That we can't quite put our finger on what it is, but we know it's what makes life worth living, what makes it meaningful. And if those kind of statements, resonate with you in any way, then I'm really glad you're here, because that is the essence of tonight's session. And let me be really clear for you that in what I'm going to be sharing with you, it's not about me being perfect. There is no pedestal. I'm just a human being. And to kind of kick things off, I want to really make something clear. Tonight, I'm going to be vulnerable with you. I'm going to be really honest. I'm going to talk about some crazy things that have happened to me. I'm going to talk about some really painful things that have happened to me. But all of it with the aim of showing that we are in a new space as a species. And that our real power, that power I talked about to actually make changes, does not come from being an impenetrable warrior, from being perfect. It comes from that imperfection, that vulnerability. That's the key word right there. I know I've shared it in previous sessions, the importance of being able to be vulnerable. And there's a phrase that goes, the thing that you can most give is the thing you most need. So perhaps as we go through this session, you'll be thinking, well, George, it doesn't sound like he's perfect. And that's because I honor that phrase. I know that I have so much to learn in this life. But I also know that I can't do anything more than what I feel called to do. And so even if I haven't got the pedestal ready, even if I haven't got whatever you quantify success and achievement as, even if I haven't got all those trappings, all I can do is show up and hope that in what I share, it sparks something in you, and you can go out and live more fulfilled, serve in a fuller way. And if that happens for even one of you guys who are watching, then how freaking awesome is that, right? So, cool. Let's get into what I'm going to be sharing. I've written it down here because I want to make sure it's going to be, tonight's session is going to be very, very much over-prepared and under-structured, because I'm sure that if any of you have done anything kind of creative, or even just as you plan, whether it's a business event or whatever, things take on a life of their own, and you have the plan and a structure, and actually the magic comes when that plan and structure can evolve and incorporate the fullness of the moment. So that's what I've really left space for tonight. I want to make sure that tonight, like I say, you get that certainty, and I think that'll show up in a few ways. I believe that you will be able to experience a deeper level of clarity about why you're here, why you chose to embark on this journey of being human, right? I really hope you'll be able to return to your work with a fresh perspective, feeling uplifted. And because you'll actually have a kind of knowledge of how to feel fulfilled in each moment. If that fulfillment slips away, if that sense of meaning, that purpose slips away, how to kind of get that back swiftly. And finally, to understand how you can actually, really step out and be making a living and making a difference, doing something that brings you alive, doing something that you love. And tonight the focus won't be specifically on that, but I really feel like the stuff that we're going to be sharing and exploring will be like the massive, like the keystones of the foundation to that. Obviously there's some practical things involved, and I've shared those in a couple of other classes, and for those who've come across my book, you'll know this, the practical insights are there. But we need to start from that foundation. And for me, that foundation is all about the story we each choose to tell, so that we can create a more powerful story together. So that's my aim for the session for you guys to get out of it. Just expanding on that certainty I want you guys to have. So to kick things off, I want to give you a sense of, I've talked a lot about stories, and for those who've met me and spoken to me or attended one of my previous classes, you'll know my passion is for spreading the message of what I call the new story that's emerging on our planet. And it is a story that is completely the antithesis of what has come before it. And to get a sense of where we've come from, we need to kind of go back a few centuries. There are a couple of very famous people, very brilliant minds who did amazing things. They were called René Descartes and Isaac Newton. And from their fantastic work, don't get me wrong, developed the philosophies of reductionist materialism. And reductionist materialism is a combination of reductionism and materialism. And if this sounds like it's going to get way complex, don't worry. I did philosophy at university, and I dropped most of my modules so that I could focus on English, because I just didn't understand the English. So I'm going to give you a real kind of simple and easy version to grasp. But in order to understand this new story that we are birthing, can you guys hear that as well? That's my daughter. She's pretty angry tonight. She missed her nap, and she's a bit aggy. So if you hear screaming, it's probably Freya saying, "Why aren't I in bed now?" So this new story comes from the old story. The foundation there is that reductionism is the idea that you can dissect everything into smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller parts. And once you get to the smallest parts and you can understand their nature, then you'll be able to understand the bigger picture that they're a part of. And in the book, I use the example that reductionism, for example, would focus on the conductor's baton, the stick the conductor uses. And reductionism would look at it and go, right, well, the little handly bit is made of cork, and we can see that the paint is a white gloss emulsion. I don't even know that's the type of paint, but you know what I mean. And it's, 12 inches long, and it weighs 47 grams. And reductionism, you could go down and down. You could even look at the molecular structure of the wood. But ultimately, we're never going to know anything more about that conductor's baton unless we appreciate that that conductor's baton only has meaning and purpose when it is in the hands of a skilled conductor. And the only way that beautiful music is going to be heard is when that baton starts moving. Just sat on a table, that baton is not going to create great symphonies. Yet when it is moving and dancing in the conductor's hand, it can move people to tears. So reductionism, that is the first, I guess, major story that our old story of life has been built on. The idea that you can cut everything down to the smallest parts and then you'll be able to understand everything. And the other element that comes in then is materialism. And that's the idea that everything is matter. And that if you can control matter, you're the lord of your destiny. And the kind of common maxims of materialism is that for every action there is equal and opposite reaction, and that something only moves if a force acts upon it. All of these kind of well-entrenched laws of physics. And actually we're starting to realize that on a quantum level, that simply isn't true. According to the materialist philosophy, if we can understand this particle and this particle is here, if we push it over here, it's going to stay here. And actually, at the quantum level, we don't even know that this particle is here. This particle only has the probability of being here. And it could just as easily be over here. And what this means is that from having this very set story that you can understand everything according to the smallest parts of that thing, and that everything is matter, and if you can therefore get to the smallest element of matter, you can understand the whole picture. Actually, we realize that at the smallest level, all there is potential energy, and that potential energy may turn up as a particle over here or as a wave over there. And this is fundamentally begun. I only say begun. It's begun the rewriting process of our story. So before we get into that, let me just kind of give you a sense of the kind of life and world that was built on the foundation of reductionist materialism. So from that, you had the idea that, human beings are, the masters of nature. The Bible very much helped this kind of story, which was, God gave man dominion over the plants and animals of the earth. So nature ceased to have this kind of spiritual alive element. It became simply matter. Because obviously if you can subscribe to a materialist philosophy, then rocks can't have spirit, trees can't have spirit, they're simply wood and stone for you to build houses with and raise armies with. So going with this kind of this materialist reductionist philosophy, we adopted a philosophy of dominion, of conquest, of control, and we wanted to, we wanted to be mightier than, rather than working with. The hierarchy structure. You had the king, and then you had the nobles and the lords, and then you had the knights, and then right down to the kind of peasants who literally lived in slavery. And this story has also obviously played into gender relations. So obviously man was superior because man was stronger. Obviously the philosophy of the old story, might is right. And so you had, the role of women just degraded, even to the point where our deity was a him. We no idea that there might possibly be a goddess. Obviously these stories are emerging now, but back then, you got burnt at the stake for suggesting that God was a him. And we may say, oh well, all of that was years ago. That was years ago. How relevant is that today? Well, it still plays out because it is like in our subconscious assumptions about the world. And we're going to explore that in a moment. I'm going to do a little exercise to, really give us a sense of what it means to have this story being the dominant story for the last, 400 or 500 years. So that's a real kind of nutshell version of what that old story is. What does the new story look like? What does this new world that is emerging? Well, that word there, emerge, is a very powerful part of it, because we are still in the transition. It is still coming forth. It is still emerging. But what it looks like is, instead of control, it's about surrender. Instead of dominion over, it's about collaboration with. Instead of might is right, it's about non-violent communication. Instead of patriarchy and hierarchy, it's about circles and flat structures and nurturing feminine energy. It's about intuition. It's about emotion. It's about vulnerability. And obviously over here, vulnerability, no. Emotions, no, I'm fine, yes. That stiff upper lip, you need, why did the British Empire do so well? Because, hell, we were masters of that old story, right? Stiff upper lip, we just went and conquered people. And now this new story is emerging. It's disrupting things a lot. If you feel like some of the things I've described there, especially the corporate world, these kind of, these box offices that we exist in, you used to have plantations and, ships where you just work in mindless, drudgery, getting whipped. Well, nowadays, you don't get whipped, but you work in mindless drudgery, and the whip is your paycheck at the end. That mortgage, that lifestyle you were told you needed, where you had to buy things to make you fill up that void that exists inside. Why does that void exist inside? Well, because we know that old story is something that has damaged us beyond knowing, and damaged our world beyond knowing. But as yet, this new story that we are starting to see, it's still emerging. And so between the two stories, we have this space here, and that space is a very uncertain space. It's a space where we do feel a bit empty at times, because we know this doesn't serve us, and yet it's so a part of our lives. We still have to earn money. We still have to, do all these things. These social norms that have been brought about by this story. And whilst we still can't see clearly how this one's going to unfold, we don't quite know what to do with ourselves. And therefore, this void gets created. And the old story loves that, because it's like, hey, you feel a bit empty, you've got a void. buy this thing, it's going to fill it up. Buy this thing, it's going to fill it up. But of course, we can't fix that wound within us according to the story that has wounded us. Does that make sense? And we are still starting to learn how to receive nourishment from this new story. And I really hope that from tonight you'll get a sense of what that is. That's the kind of new versus the old story. And what does it mean on a practical level? So I cover that obviously in my book, but it's really that there's some new rules coming into play. The old rules were go to school, get your grades, get a job. And if you wanted the upgrade, you'd go to school, get your grades, and go to university and get a better job. And that worked for our parents' generation. I don't know how, maybe some of you guys are of that generation and it sounds familiar, right? But for my generation and younger, that doesn't work anymore. You go to school, you get your grades, and youth unemployment is at record levels. Over 1 million young people out of work. You go to school, you get your grades, and 1 in 4 graduates is out of school, is out of work still a year after university. And you know, the Guardian recently said, you know, graduates face less satisfying careers at less pay with less job security than their parents. So we know that that old story is, you know, the rules it lived by do not serve our current generation, our current way of life. So the new rules are as follows, and they're really simple, but they are challenging to live because we're still emerging from the old story into the new. But the new rules go like this: find something you love doing and get brilliant at it. Shall I say it again? Find something you love doing and get brilliant at it. What that means is there is this uprising of desire for people to be creative, to connect with their joy, whether it's music, dance, writing, you know, entrepreneurship, accountancy, anything, but actually to live it in a way that feels authentic to them, true to them, where they can live their true story, not the story that they were told they had to live. So to give you a sense of just how fully this new story is emerging and why it's so important that we start living those new rules instead of the old rules that have been limiting us now, I want to share with you some stories. And the first is a bit about where I'm at, because I said I was going to be vulnerable and kind of share. And, you know, truthfully, whilst I've been doing amazing research over the last few months, I've been working with some beautiful, beautiful partners. I don't like to say the word clients because, look, this is a new world we're building, and I am blessed to know the people who I work with, who I support to make the kind of changes I'm talking about. And it's been so amazing to be able to work with them and to really, seems like help them. You know, I get great feedback, and having people coming up to me, you know, who had, you know, tears in their eyes when they've read my book, that's like mind-blowing. But equally, I guess I'm quite an impatient person, and so I'm like, right, the new story's happening. This is brilliant. This is wonderful. I'm doing work that I love. I'm having a massive difference. Fantastic. Where's my millions of pounds? Oh no, hang on a sec. Wait, that's the old story. I don't need millions of pounds. Okay, but how does money work? Oh, that's old. And so at the same time as I've, you know, been doing amazing stuff, equally I've been experiencing some fantastic resistance and some like almost, imagine it like this, right? Here, the old story over here, and it's got a load of barbs, like barbed hooks in me, and I'm trying to walk out, like embark into the journey of the new story, and there's these like barbs in my flesh, like pulling me back, and those barbs are the conditioning. Like I said, the age-old conditioning of this old story. Conditioning that I didn't even know. I thought I'd done loads of work and had shifted it, and you know, I've had these moments of incredible clarity and purpose where I'm doing awesome work, amazing events. Like, let me show you this, right? This is a manga warrior, and it was drawn for me by a 10-year-old boy at one of my events I did with a community down in Cornwall. And at this event, I had a 10-year-old boy up to an 82-year-old woman, and all of them just loving it. And I was like, oh my God, how, like, and then I'd go back into kind of commuting to London to do bits of work and stuff, after going to this event and serving in this way. And I found myself being profoundly, profoundly like miserable, because I'm just like, oh my God, there is such beauty, such wonder in the world where you're able to come together with amazing people and, create a space where you feel nourished, you feel alive. And then it's back to the treadmill of trying to make sure there's enough money at the end of the month. And at that point, when that's where the old story really kicks in, because it knows how to mess with you fully. As soon as you waver from that complete alignment where you're just energized, as soon as you waver, those barbs really start to pull strongly. And I mean, does this resonate with you? If what I'm sharing here resonates with you, then please let me know. Hit me up in the comments. How have you been getting on? Have you been having these moments where you get a sense, a glimpse of an amazing new way of being, or something you always knew was there, and you're like so confident you can take the steps towards it, and you get this amazing high, and then the balloon pops, and you find yourself like almost walking through treacle. So that's why in this session I say, there's no pedestal here. I share what I'm sharing with you because I know it's possible. I know what is coming. I know what is emerging, based not only on the research, but on these experiences I've been having. That it is so possible to be doing work that lights us up, and that makes a huge difference. And yet there is these barbs that we have to get through. So I want to speak to those barbs, to that conditioning right now. And the main way that these barbs show up and that conditioning shows up is in the form of assumptions. One of the biggest assumptions is a lad called Darwin. And he had this story, which was that those who are the strongest, who are the fittest, they survive and they thrive. And Darwin himself admitted that his theory was only as good as, until someone else came along with something better. He had recognized that it was a temporary offering. And yet, thanks to this reductionist materialism, where actually, obviously, the fittest, they evolve through genetic mutations. And you can understand genetic mutations because that's like that small DNA stuff. And also it's matter. It's this kind of, we can understand DNA because we can cut it open and we can analyze it. So obviously Darwin's theory fits into this reductionist materialism perfectly, because we can understand the scientific step-by-step linear process by which survival of the fittest happens. But actually, there's something missing here, because that's not really how nature works. Nature works through synergies. And the cells of our body are a very good demonstration of this. The cells of our body respond to the area around them. So say you've got a cell here and it realizes something's wrong. All the cells around it will adjust accordingly. So literally the health of the individual cell is dependent on the health of the cells around it. And the story that gives us is not one of survival of the fittest, not of I'm the best cell and I'm going to survive. No. It's of survival and thriving of the most collaborative. And that is a part of our human story that's fundamentally missing. I'm going to talk a bit about forgotten stories after I talk about assumptions. And one of those forgotten stories is that there is this whole period of human history which has either been conveniently swept under the carpet or forgotten about. Around kind of 2,000-3,000 years ago, archaeologists had discovered that there were whole societies during a time when we were largely thought to be very primitive, people emerging from the Neanderthal age, who actually had fantastically evolved societies, living in large village groups, very sophisticated, pottery, tools. And there is no sign in these archaeological digs of any weapons. And yet we have this story told to us through Thomas Hobbes and others that, you know, in a kind of uncivilized state as it was back then, you know, man would be existing in this perpetual cycle of war where he's, you know, trying to constantly fight against nature, i.e. the savage beasts who could kill him, and fight against his, you know, fellow human beings who he can't trust because they're going to steal from him and they're going to, maximize their own self-interest. And what these archaeological findings, pioneered by a wonderful woman called Maria Gimbaltas, really do check out. There's a wonderful YouTube documentary that talks about her work. They found that there were these societies that were peaceful, that were collaborative, and that worshipped, the goddess in nature and in themselves. And when we understand this, we realize that the whole Darwin survival of the fittest thing is simply that. It's just a story that is outdated. And from Darwin comes this idea that if you've got to be the fittest to survive, well, then we have to conquer ourselves. And a lot of religious doctrine played into this. The idea of kind of the flesh is sinful, so we've got to master the flesh, and we've got to master our, self-control and restraint. So from that idea that, everything, this materialist way where everything needs to be controlled, it came back onto the self, and we try to control ourselves. And if we can't control ourselves, well, then we kind of project onto others and we try and deal with them. And it's built about this very damaging idea where we're not allowed to make mistakes. And if we make mistakes, we beat ourselves up. By the way, does this sound familiar? We're trying to kind of constantly on this quest to be better and better and better and better. And actually, according to new theories and sciences, it's one of the worst things we can do is to kind of be on this conquest of ourselves. A lady called Kelly McGonigal has done some amazing work around willpower. And obviously willpower is a massive part of this self-control, this self-conquest process. And she's discovered that those people who were most likely to, and this is in a study with people who had serious eating problems, weight loss problems, those who were most likely to exhibit self-control were those who, after they'd had a slip, after they'd actually, eaten a donut or whatever it was, instead of feeling guilty and beating themselves up, they were given, in a research subject, they were given messages of self-compassion. They were said, look, everyone does it. We told you to eat the donut, don't worry about it. And, please don't be too hard on yourself. And what they found was that the people who got this message of self-compassion and who weren't hard on themselves actually afterwards were able to exhibit far more self-control than those who then beat themselves up and were then presented with a room full of candy. So these fundamental assumptions that our stories of life have been built on, we can see how flimsy they are. They don't stand up to rigor or to actually deeper analysis. Darwin, just a temporary theory. Self-conquest, self-control actually is in many ways damaging to the very process of trying to improve oneself through discipline. The more hard we are on ourselves, the harder it becomes to take the steps we want to take. And I guess that's the kind of the self element. Let's look at some of the assumptions we have around the M word, money. So one of the things you'll commonly hear, especially in the kind of world of personal development or New Age or whatever, is, oh, money is just energy, and you can do with it what you want. To a degree, that's true, but actually, it doesn't recognize the fundamental nature of money as it is at the moment, and that is every single pound that is issued, every single dollar that is issued as debt at interest. And therefore, what that means is when you never have enough money, because obviously all the money that's being created is created with interest, well, actually, you'll always need to somehow create more goods and value so that you can pay off the interest. What that means is that this money that's just energy, fundamentally, if it is money that is issued as debt, with interest, the only way that we can get back to break even is to turn something sacred into money. And so that is why, I really want to challenge the assumption that money is just energy. At the moment, yes, money can be just energy, but at the moment, it's money with a negative energy because it necessitates the turning of a forest into money, or the overfishing of seas so that the loan that the fisherman borrowed can be paid back. Every time we seek to break even, we break something sacred that we can't repair. And so that's why I really want to challenge some of these assumptions. And one that comes with money, because obviously it's the key cog in the wheel, if you like, is that growth is good. Growth is the be-all and end-all. Economic growth for economic growth's sake is the absolute answer. We've just seen that actually, no. And I'm sure you know this yourself. So many of us are engaged in meaningless work for the sake of a profit sheet, for the sake of economic growth. And here's where it really starts to come together. If we've always got to be growing and building, well then, consequently, a story of struggle is going to emerge, where those who work hardest get the most. And look, I'm not disputing the importance of working hard, but there is a time for hard work, and there is a time for re-energizing, for connecting with what is sacred, for surrendering, for just being. And yet we have this story that says, if you take a moment to, go on holiday, to spend time with the kids, you've always got to struggle with this work-life balance. And actually, it's really not the case. Speaking to so many entrepreneurs and artists who are starting to make the new story work for them, they say one of the biggest challenges they have is actually accepting and becoming comfortable with the fact that what they are doing, they find effortless. And yet this effortless thing that they are doing is bringing them in more money and opportunity than when they were struggling to do something different, struggling to do the proper job that the old story told them they had to have. And I'll be frank with you right now that this is something that I'm playing with this dynamic right now. There are times when I bring in more money and more opportunity than I was like, oh my God, how did this happen? And it's doing stuff that I find effortless, really easy, and I love, love, love doing it. And then there's sometimes when I get back into the world I think I'm meant to be in, and it all just kind of falls apart. So I say that not from a place of completeness, but from a place where I'm still emerging. But speaking to others who I know it is happening for, really one of the great things you could do is start to let go of that story of struggle. This new world, this new story that's emerging, it is meant to be joyful. It is meant to be us in our flow. And when we talk about flow, flow it's constant movement. There is no struggle with flow. Flow meets an obstacle and it just goes around it effortlessly. And we've all heard about being in our flow. We've all spoken about being in our flow. And so flow is very much the antithesis of this story of struggle. And the final assumption that I want to kind of challenge with you, by the way, please pop in the comments, let me know that some of this stuff is resonating with you, is actually starting to open things up a bit for you. And the final one, maybe I'm taking a leap too far for some, but I feel it's important that we actually get the fullness of the stories out there. It comes in the form of work of a guy called Michael Newton, and he was a hypnotherapist who began working with his clients to actually help them heal blocks and limitations and patterns that were stuck. And he was a very rigorous, very kind of purely by the book, scientific kind of guy. Very much, if you can't touch it, it doesn't exist, sort of thing. He was, your typical materialist scientist, right? And in some sessions, he asked his patients when he was kind of coming up against a bit of a brick wall in terms of helping them to mate and shit. You go, okay, cool. Well, let's go to the source of the pain. And what would happen is his patients would actually start telling him things from previous lives. And the first time this happened, he was with a young woman who said, I'm now a soldier in the Battle of the Somme, and I'm being bayoneted. And he was able to kind of get her to kind of just pause and look at the scene she was in, and to look at the military insignia on her arm, or his arm, as the young man in the Somme was then before her previous life, her current life. And he was a bit of an amateur military historian, and he knew that there was no way this woman who was sitting in his office could have known about this military insignia, and yet he knew that that battalion had been stationed in that place in the Somme. And this obviously messed with his story, right? He was old story, and it was a big news story moment for him. And as more and more things like that started happening, he surrendered. He went with the flow. And he's written a couple of books called Journey of Souls. And I think, more Journey of Souls is the next one. And it documents this entire world between lives, where our souls, that immaterial spark, that greater part of ourselves, our higher selves, whatever you want to call it, returns to reflect on the life lessons we've taken. Essentially, the human experience on planet Earth is a classroom. We are here to learn how to grow and evolve as infinite beings. And this work is, for me, one of the most powerful examples and ways to kind of shatter that old story that once you die, that's it, boom, worm food, okay? Obviously, ancient traditions, indigenous cultures know that life expands both into the future and into the past. There is this continuum. And we're now starting to step into that again. And Michael Newton's work, being as he was, someone very skeptical, it meant that he was really quite rigorous in how he presented his work. So I really wanted to share that with you, because maybe it gives you a sense that if you did choose to come here, as it is starting to appear that you did, if that is the case, well then why would you like to have come here? Let's not worry about some huge great purpose that is divinely inspired. That may well exist. But let's ask a better question. Why would you like to be here? Because here's the thing, right? If Earth is a classroom for the soul, then right now you have come to Earth at a really freaking challenging time, where the old story has probably got its claws and its barbs into you, and you feel limited in a lot of ways. So can you imagine a greater challenge than being able to free yourself from the limitations of the old story and step into something you would love to be doing? That's why I think that is the most important question. If you did choose to come here, what would you love to be doing while you're here? Because the challenge of actually being able to do that in this lifetime will be the most inspiring, uplifting, full of growth journey you could possibly choose. And if there is some geezer or woman with a grey beard or some long grey hair and a robe, there is no judgment on their part. Whatever you choose to do, they are celebrating. And all of life, whether you believe in, spirit worlds and beyond, and, life that is filling our cosmos from planet to galaxy, all life celebrates when you step into just deciding to do something you love. So I want to now, having questioned some assumptions, talk about a couple of forgotten stories that really show just how limiting those assumptions are. And I'm going to kind of nail through them so we can cover the promises I gave to you through some of the promotional material about what you're really going to be able to kind of take practically from this. So the first is a guy called Royal Rife, and he was a researcher in the 1930s who was given a number of hopeless cancer patients to work with, because he said he developed this technology that destroyed cancerous cells. And he had this contraption, he called it the frequency instrument, which fired particular frequencies of radio waves at the cancerous areas. And these cases who were written off as hopeless, they had like literally months or weeks to live, experienced spontaneous remissions in almost all cases. And when he tried to bring this to market, he was literally hounded out by the medical profession, by lawsuits. When people in the 1960s tried to get hold of his technology and bring it to market again, they were threatened both physically and emotionally. One woman who tried to share this instrument with her friends was so badly threatened mentally that she spent the next 6 years of her life in a sanatorium, in a madhouse. So you're thinking, my God, what is going on here with this old story where a cure for cancer exists and people are getting threatened that much because they're trying to share it with the world? A similar one exists in one of the things you might have seen, my story of healing my abscessed tooth. There was no dentist because it was the Easter weekend, and I didn't really like any of the other suggestions for treatments I was looking at. So what did I do? I turned to an ancient therapy called urine therapy. And this involves swishing my own urine out my mouth, 3 or 4 times a day. My abscess cured in a matter of hours. In one of the most amazing things I've ever seen. My face was swollen, intense pain, and within a matter of hours, my abscess had pustullated out, swelling had gone down, pain had gone. Absolutely unbelievable. And there are cases of urine therapy curing cancer, curing kidney failure, curing all manner of skin conditions, all manner of tuberculosis, bronchitis, all of these sorts of things. It has a very ancient tradition right across to India and ancient China, and into the modern world as well. But it's one of those forgotten stories that is on the fringes of our lives. And these forgotten stories, if we can bring them back to center stage, then the world we will create together will be unimaginable. Nikola Tesla, obviously the father of modern day electricity, he invented alternating current. He was also given some funding. After they saw that alternating current worked, he was given some funding to develop the next stage of his project. What did he do? He developed a way to beam electricity wirelessly to anywhere on the planet free of charge. What happened? His laboratory was burned to the ground, and he was told, if I can't sell it, I can't support it, by his main financer, JP Morgan. And I share that to really give a sense, when people talk about, peak oil and energy crisis and all these sorts of things, and oil prices, petrol prices, and agriculture, how it relies on oil and fertilizers, just to shatter that myth that some form of abundant free energy technology exists. Of course it does. Tesla was working in the 1920s, and since then we have poured billions and billions and billions of pounds and dollars into high-level research that is classified beyond top secret. So the technologies exist, and when we know that, when we accept that, when we understand that, it helps us to look far more hopefully at the world. Because when we feel like we are in the kind of control of these major oil companies who have us by the short and curlies, it's very disempowering. But actually the technologies do exist, and there is only so long that money and threats can stop the human race from creating a better future for itself. And that comes in the form of another guy called Alan Savory, working in a very different field. Desertification, which is where vast areas of the world are turning to desert thanks to global warming and modern agriculture techniques, is one of the greatest threats we face. And yet there is a guy called Alan Savory who's got a fantastic TED talk called How to Turn the Deserts Green. And he talks about using livestock, mimicking how nature works, which is obviously back in the day, probably still does, would group together, wildebeest and antelope would group together in tight communities, tight-knit groups, so that if a predator came, they could move as one. And what that meant was they'd poo and pee on the ground in like really intense little pockets. And in those intense little pockets, greenery would blossom very, very quickly. So he's shown by mimicking these techniques, by really closely grazing livestock, you can turn just absolute desert to greenery in a matter of months. It's absolutely incredible when you watch this talk. And finally, I want to talk a bit about the forgotten stories of education. A guy called John Taylor Gatto talks about, he's an educational historian, talks about how education was literally an indoctrination process so that we could train younger people to become compliant workers. You see, at the dawn of the Industrial Revolution, people were engaged in meaningful work, working on the land, growing their food, existing in community. And the industrialists saw that if they were going to, advance their story of conquest and of riches, they would need compliant workers who somehow could be persuaded to work 12-hour shifts doing repetitive, meaningless, mindless work. Now, no one would choose to do that. If you were happy and content, growing your own food, living in a community, even if you weren't wealthy, somehow you just wouldn't see any point in that. So they developed two things, obviously. This kind of consumerist mentality where you buy these things, look at these things, they'll make your life amazing. Obviously sold to you by making you think you were less. Sold to you, making you think there was something wrong with you and that this product would solve what was wrong with you. So that was the one thing, the consumerist story that was sold. Coupled with an education process that standardized and dehumanized the brilliance and uniqueness and creativity in favor of making people compliant by doing tests and saying, if you do these tests and you follow these rules, then you get to do these things which we tell you are good. So you have these stories that shed, I hope, some light on what's the story beyond the story. We have this old story that is still very powerful, but I hope that some of these stories I've been sharing with you, some of these examples, are breaking through and showing that there is this whole other world. So let's come on to how you can be a part of that other world. And let me just kind of scroll down. Let me just check in. How are you guys feeling? I'm going to grab a little bit of water. We've got about 30 minutes left. I know I've been doing a lot of talking. I want to just, hit me up in the comments. Let's see how we're getting on. Fantastic. Cool. All right, nice. It's resonating. Good stuff. All right, nice. Okay, cool. Okay, what we got? All right. So what was the woman's name? Which woman's that? Oh yeah, Maria Gimbaltus, who is an amazing archaeologist. So yeah, check her out. Okay, cool. So nice, fantastic. I'm loving the honesty here. So Vincenzo's saying that he feels a sense of wanting the Ferrari, but also not wanting to chase the money. Okay, cool. So let's make sure we cover some of these. All right, good stuff. All right. Okay, so content. Okay, cool. All right, good. Guys, loving the sharing. Well done. Like, seriously, I know there's a few of you perhaps aren't able to share on the comments, but for those who have, fantastic. And those who haven't, hit me up on Facebook at the end of this or send me an email. Let me know how you've been getting on. Any questions? At the end of this, I'm going to invite you to a party, and we're going to take it from there. So, cool. Great stuff. I'm loving this. All right, good. Okay. Let me just grab some more. Let's roll. Okay. So, I made a few promises for those who saw it. The first promise I made was that you discover the real story that influences everything. And to help us discover this, we're going to do a little exercise. Okay? Right now, I want you just to take a deep breath, close your eyes, and imagine yourself doing nothing but being. Just being. So go ahead, close your eyes, and imagine yourself doing nothing but being. You're just being. That's all. Just see yourself just being. Imagine yourself just being. Cool. All right, open your eyes. Good. Very quick question, right? Who here, or who are connecting on this call, obviously not here, and stick it in the comments. Let me know. How did you see yourself? Answer this question. Were you alone? If you were alone, just put yes, I was alone, or just put alone in the box. Or did you see yourself just being with other people? And even before I check the comments, I'm 90% certain that almost every one of you will put I was alone when I pictured myself just being. What am I getting at here? The fundamental story that all of what we're talking about builds from is that the story we have been running with on the most fundamental level is a story of separation. That we are alone in the world, and obviously we are interacting, but I ask you just to be, just to imagine yourself being. And here's the thing, if I'd asked that same question of indigenous cultures, of people in a tribe, I'm almost certain that 100% of them would have imagined themselves with their tribe members together. Because obviously, you've heard of the idea of Ubuntu, I am because you are. They come from a fundamentally different story of interconnectedness, of what an amazing author, a guy called Charles Eisenstein, calls interbeing. And here, when we have this story of separation, where we believe that we are alone, it impacts everything else. It impacts everything else. And obviously over here, if we are in this old story of being alone, then it's much harder to trust, to assume that you're a good person. Because here's the thing, it's almost like a living contradiction. We know that as human beings, we are meant to be connected with each other. There's something deep inside us that knows that. And yet, we have this like deep story that tells us we're somehow alone and separate. And so you have this kind of conflict going on. And no, is it any wonder, therefore, that sometimes we're like, oh, I feel like I should be doing this, but I also feel like this is what's going on as well. Does anyone ever feel this? You feel conflicted. And on a fundamental level, that's what's going on. We live in an incredibly interconnected, interdependent world where, we literally are, if all the fish died out, or, here's the thing, if suddenly the trees decided that they were going to do photosynthesis a different way, we'd be dead within minutes, okay? So to say that we are not, interconnected is an absolute fallacy. And yet we have built so much of our lives over the centuries on this idea that we are separate, that we are a lone individual. And what can we do to shift that? Well, fundamentally it starts with just reminding ourselves of that. And there are so many habits of that separation that play out. Habits of being judgmental on ourselves, being judgmental on others. Here's the thing, if we're separate, right, how easy is it to go, oh, look at them, aren't they doing something wrong? Or if we're separate, how easy is it to go, oh my God, I'm so terrible, they're so much better than me, right? As opposed to seeing ourselves as unique and brilliant parts of a much greater synergetic whole. And yet, it's so easy to kind of forget that. Obviously, one of the things I do, I work with a lot with young people, and especially young rappers. And so I come up against this story of separation every day because they sit there and they watch their televisions, and you've got the stars on there like driving their cars, throwing their money at naked women and like slapping the naked women and stuff. And I'm like, oh my God, it's like, I think there's very few things that capture that essence of separation more than a terrible hip hop video. Because it's like basically we play on this separation. If you see this hip hop guy and he's got the nice car, it creates a vacuum in you because you've been told he is achieving success, and money is the way that we judge that, obviously. Then therefore you start wanting that thing, and you believe that you're somehow lacking because you don't have these things. So I'm sure even if you're not into hip hop, you know what I'm talking about. So it really comes from reminding yourself, and how we can actually start doing that even more powerfully links into the second thing I want to share with you. Okay, so first is just remind ourselves, and the way that we remind ourselves is by spotting when we are sabotaging the life we're meant to be living. And this is it's a tricky one for me, but it really does come down to how we feel. I know in my full self, when I am fully in my power, when I am serving as I know I can serve, when I am filled up with the love that I know exists, and when I've managed for a moment to break free of the old story, then I know that there is a life that I can live and a way that I can be that is whole and complete and fulfilling. And every time I don't feel like that, in truth, I'm sabotaging the life I'm meant to be living. And yet it's so difficult to catch myself. But that's what I'm asking you to do here, is to catch yourself when you recognize that you feel discontentment. And give me 1 second here. Can you hear that? Is that my daughter? Yeah. Fan, do you want to put it in the bedroom? So we got 15 minutes left. So sorry for this slight interruption there. Being a young father, you know how it is. So listen, how do we catch ourselves? You know, you may say, "Oh, that's all very well, George," but you know, and here's the thing: I'm not saying I'm perfect at it, but like I said, I've been doing some great research recently. I'm kind of sharing fresh off the kind of fresh off the oven rack. Is when you feel miserable, essentially, or you feel like frustrated. You know, all of these are signs. Here's the thing: when you feel lazy, when you're procrastinating, all of these are signs that you are not aligned to a connected way of living. Okay. You know, we feel lazy or we procrastinate because we are disinterested in the old story. You know, why would you do something that tells you you're a separate being when you know you're magical and connected and beautiful? So why would you? How could you get interested? So the way we catch ourselves is to honor our feelings, but also, here's the thing: when we feel those things, to give ourselves love. I know that, I'm sure that you've been procrastinating at times and you've beaten yourself up for it. That's not it. That's not it. Okay, that's just going to reinforce it. Because here's the thing: if you procrastinate and then you judge yourself, again, you're judging yourself against a separate ideal, an ideal of separation. It perpetuates that story. So to break that link and to turn that self-sabotage into opportunities, we need to love ourselves. And it sounds so very simple, I know, but what I really want to understand is that we think, because of this old story, that we have to beat ourselves up and that's the most effective way. No, it really comes from accepting and loving and then stepping out from there. And if you want to help this process really powerfully, because look, I know that a lot of what I'm saying here, you share that with some people and they're going to be like, "You're woo-woo, you're away with the fairies." So how do we support ourselves to keep us, supporting the changes we need to make? And I'd say, get a peer group. And I'm sure you know this, but if you can't even get a peer group, get someone. Connect with me. Get someone who can help you to reinforce the new story and reinforce its place in your life and that you are living it. And who can help you to love yourself and to catch yourself and to move beyond the judgments and the sabotage. So that's my thing, is become aware of it, give it love, and get yourself a buddy who can help you out as well. Okay, does that make sense? Cool. So the other one is a couple of things around kind of new technologies that are suggesting a very powerful new way. And I spoke a bit about monkeys and crystals. And the question here is, how can we live this life that we know awaits us? How can we step into it? How can we, make that, how can these small little bits we're doing make a difference? And I want to share with you a bit about the science of morphogenetic fields. A guy called Rupert Sheldrake, who was looking at two things. One was crystals, crystal formation. And he was looking at these solutions which he knew that under certain situations ought to crystallize, and they weren't. And what he found was that after one of the solutions had successfully crystallized, suddenly the solution in the next door lab would crystallize. And what would then start happening is solutions of the same thing in labs across the world would start crystallizing almost spontaneously. And he looked into this and he realized that there was nothing else. There was no physical matter that could be playing on this. There weren't like, little atoms or molecules that could be doing it. What he realized was there are these energetic fields, and everything has them. Every tree, every rock, the human species as a whole, as well as us as individuals, we all emanate and are part of these morphogenetic fields, these fields of energy that actually help us. They're like the blueprint of life, if you like. So that when an oak tree is growing, it grows its leaves according to the morphogenetic field of an oak leaf. And what he found was that as changes occur within these fields, so in the crystals example, as changes occur within that crystal's field, i.e. one crystallizes and then another crystallizes, suddenly the very concept of crystallization becomes a part of the field, and therefore the spontaneous crystallizations occurred across the world. And this is perhaps for me the most powerful bit of evidence around how we can start being the change we want to see. And it comes down to the idea that that little thing you think is insignificant is anything but. Because every little thing you do, every time you let go of the sabotage of the old story and the limitation and the self-hatred, and you step into the love and the connectedness of the new story, it is an act that adds power to the overall field of the new story that's emerging. That's why every single minute of every single second of every single day, you genuinely can make a difference. Just by being you and being loving and seeking to live your life within the new story. And of course there will be challenges. But every time you rise above those challenges, or you flow through those challenges, shall we say, again, you empower the field with more flow through of challenge. So I hope that makes sense, because it's such an exciting piece of data, and it really is quite new. It's still regarded as a bit fringe, but here's the thing, right? You've probably heard the phrase, the truth goes through 3 stages. First, it's ridiculed, then it's attacked, and then it's accepted. And right now, we're at the stage with morphogenetic fields where they're moving from being ridiculed to being attacked, because they present a very big threat to scientific orthodoxy, which is still, sadly, mired in reductionist materialism. So that's how crystals and monkeys can help you. And the monkeys is about the 100th monkey syndrome, where on isolated islands, one monkey starts getting ants with a stick, and then all the monkeys on the island start doing it, and then monkeys on an entirely separate island who've never even looked at ants and sticks before, suddenly all the monkeys on a separate island are doing the same thing. So the morphogenetic field of monkeys suddenly had ants and sticks in it, and this is monkeys with ants and sticks. So I hope those examples give you that. And the final one I wanted to take you through is the major assumption that people make that stops them from living the life they want to live and stops them from achieving in the way that they should. And this assumption has 2 parts, and they're obviously very closely interconnected. One is the assumption that we have to struggle. And I've spoken a bit about it before, but it is this assumption that we have to struggle, and that the only way to do something is if you work hard, and the only way to achieve is if you work hard. And I think perhaps we need to understand the context here. Work hard there means, perhaps do something we don't enjoy doing, so that somehow in the future we'll get some form of gratification. We delay enjoyment now and suffer misery so that we can get some enjoyment in the future. Okay, and that ties into the idea that somehow we have to be doing something big and huge, and especially something big and huge and original. And people think, oh well, everyone else, I'd love to do this, but there's loads of people doing that, so there's no point. I could never make a living doing that. And that simply isn't true. Not only because there's 7 billion of us on this planet and we're becoming more and more connected, but because if it's the thing you feel called to do, and it's the thing you find easy and effortless and you love doing it, then you will be adding so much to the overall field of the new story. And if it's not original and there's other people doing it, fantastic. That must mean that there's no accidents in life. that must mean that it is a vital part of this new story. And therefore, the more people that are doing it, the better, because it adds even more power to the field. So you don't have to struggle. You can work diligently and passionately, absolutely. You know, I could keep going for hours and hours, and, you know, probably like, oh no, George, please don't. But literally, you know, someone say, oh, that's hard work. You know, you're speaking and talking and teaching for so long. But no, you know, this energizes me, and I'm sure you find the same in the work that you would love to be doing. It is not about struggle. It's about joy. And when we enjoy what we're doing, time flies by. We work probably far harder than we would if we're doing something we were forced to do. So that, I guess, sums everything up. Is, you know, we have this new story that's emerging. It is beautiful, and because of the technologies that have been suppressed, the stories that have been forgotten that we are now remembering, we know it can be beautiful and truly amazing. And we also know that there is this new kind of emerging technology and field called morphogenesis, which means that every single thing we do has significance because it adds to the overall power of what we are creating. So how do we bring this together? Well, look, this has been a really kind of fly by the seat of the pants session where I've given you loads of information, but also I've not been able to go fully into the stories as I would like. You know, I've given you loads of stories, and they obviously all have their own deep roots, and I want to be able to share them more fully. And I want to really be able to take these ideas and apply them practically. So what I'd love to invite you to is a weekend called New Story, New You. And it's done on the basis of a new story. I'm still learning how this whole money thing works. There are times when I'll be paid for my work because people will approach me and I know that I can add the value I'm asking for. This event is something that it will be completely new. And it will be a celebration of life and of stories. And therefore, I could make up a price, but it feels far more congruent with the new story to say, listen, I'd love for you to come. And at the end of it, if you've enjoyed it, you pay me what you would like to pay. And I don't have a set date for it yet. It will be at the beginning of September, a weekend either right at the end of August or at the start of September. So here's the thing, all I want right now is just you say, yeah, I'd be interested in coming to that and finding out a bit more. I'm going to put together a little blurb to kind of give you guys a bit more of info. And so whether you're on the comments, hit me up on that, or send me a message on Facebook and say, yeah, George, I'll be interested to know a bit more about the New Story, New You party. That's it. And look, if you've enjoyed this session, please tell people about my book, about the blog, which is creativeuprising.com. I hope you've enjoyed the articles I've been posting there or on Facebook. And more than anything else, getting a bit emotional here, more than anything else, just be loving to yourself, because the greatest thing we can do is to bring more love into the world. The New Story is about deep, powerful interconnectedness from a place of true and whole love. The old story can only exist if it keeps you separate and divided and lacking in love for yourself and others. As soon as you fill yourself up with love and you start giving that love to others, the old story can have no power over you. So thank you so much for being here and giving me love in the form of your time. I hope you've enjoyed it, and please do let me know how you've enjoyed it. And again, I hope you will let me know you fancy coming to the party, New Story, New You, at the start of September. Thank you so much for being here. And let's finish with let's finish with a poem. I always like to finish with a poem. And this poem, I'm not sure if I shared it before, but it feels really right to share it now, because part of the new story of that interconnectedness is reconnecting with our earth, with the mother that truly nourishes us. And it's about bringing back the magic. You know, before the old story came and got its claws into us, we knew that everything had spirit, that everything was connected. And as a result, we were able to do what people would call magic today. But it's simply about being truly connected and working with all the energies of life. So this poem is called The Re-Enchantment of Gaia, and it's about bringing back the magic into our connection with all of life. All that you are, it's all you can be. So be what you love until all of you's free. And all that you seek, it's all you will find. And magic will be if you've magic in mind. So let your heart voice its truth. Let your life be the proof. You care not just for yourself, but for our old and our youth. Let your actions be judged, but let your soul be forgiving. Because we all make mistakes in this age that we're living, where our every moment has meaning, has hope, has screaming. Yet even in stream and stone, you'll find love's spirit is dreaming. And our means for healing? Simple. Just smiles and laughter, which should be our constant focus as we motion to avert disaster. And earth's price to be paid, it may well be our lives. But the greatest journeys are the ones taken inside. And the stakes will rise. There's no doubting that. The challenge to come is knowing how to react. From the perspective of now, of this old story, place and time, or as an infinite soul who was born to shine. Love or fear? That's the simple choice. It's time to witness a species start using their voice. So don't think twice, don't even pause. It's one love from wherever you are to the Glastonbury tour, and the more we seek to give out love in our lives, the greater our means to each live loving lives. That's why we give love to the hives and to all of our bees. To heal our Mother Earth, guide us we plead. It's time to rescue the seed, it's time to blaze up the fires of need, to reignite Gaia and replant the trees. Because that is the true revolution, right there in your hands. It's as simple as put your heart into healing the place where you stand. And on that basis, can man, woman and child re-embrace the nature of the beautiful wild, with no need to be filed or data protected, knowing all life is by love, so completely connected, which is to be expected, because, dear soulmate, all that you are is all you can be. So be what you love until all of you is free. Thank you. Have a fantastic week ahead. So much love, and I look forward to hearing from you. Take care.